Please don't rely on ancestry kits for paternity tests. If you want to confirm your child's parentage, go for a proper paternity test at a local medical lab. Ancestry tests aren't accurate and should never be used to determine paternity. In my case, it raised concerns that led to a legitimate test. My life has been turned upside down in the past few weeks. I want to provide as much context as possible to get the best advice, but I'm not ready to discuss this with my friends, parents, or siblings. Background. I met my wife in high school and we got married during college. We have 5 wonderful children together, ages 33, 30, 28, 24, and 14. And regardless of what I'm about to share, I consider them a true blessing. Until a couple of weeks ago, I believed we had a perfect marriage. We were high school sweethearts, went out together, rarely had any arguments, and I felt like I was doing everything a loving husband should do. I don't mean to paint myself as a perfect spouse. I've had long working hours, and I might not have always been there when she needed me. But I want to emphasize that I never thought our marriage was in trouble. I never even suspected my wife of being unfaithful. She's always supported me and taken care of our children. Now, my oldest daughter recently did an ancestry test, and the results strongly suggested that I wasn't her biological father. She shared this with me privately, showing me the results, and I could see how upset she was. My first reaction was to reassure her that no matter what, she's my daughter, and I'll always love her no matter what. Secondly, we decided to get an official paternity test because ancestry tests aren't entirely reliable. The results confirmed that I am not her biological father. This news completely devastated me. I'm ashamed to admit that I broke down in tears in front of my daughter. It was a combination of discovering my wife's infidelity and my emotional reaction, which deeply upset my daughter. I wish I had held it together for her sake, but I couldn't. Afterward, I gathered my other children, except for the youngest one, to have a talk. I wanted to understand the extent of my wife's infidelity. If it was a one-time thing, maybe I could work through it, especially considering how long ago it might have happened. However, I didn't feel it was appropriate to involve my youngest child, who is still in school and a teenager. I shared the situation with the other 3 children and reassured them of my unconditional love. I told them that I'll always be their dad, but needed to know how long this had been going on. Their reaction was incredibly touching. They didn't care about the biological aspect. They were just upset to see how heartbroken I was. Their unwavering support has been my lifeline in these past couple of weeks. We had paternity tests done for each of the 3 children. Shockingly, none of them turned out to be my biological children, and they have 3 different fathers. Strangely, this revelation made the situation even worse. It wasn't just one ongoing affair, it was multiple. I can't quite explain why, but it does make it feel more devastating. I confronted my wife about this, expecting her to confess and seek forgiveness. However, she neither confessed nor took it seriously. She claimed the tests must be flawed. All 4 of them? It's hard to take that seriously. I kept bringing it up and she dismissed it, growing increasingly annoyed with me. She even tried to guilt-trip me, saying things like, "We've been together since high school, do you seriously not trust me?" But how can I trust her when the evidence is so overwhelming? Now that I've explained what happened, let me ask a few direct questions for advice. How can I reassure my children that this doesn't change anything between us? I fear my emotional breakdowns have made them doubt this, despite my repeated reassurances. How should I handle my youngest daughter? It seems like our marriage is beyond repair and I'll eventually have to tell her something. I don't want her to know the truth until she's older, but I also don't want my wife to lie and paint me as the villain. Is there any way at all to save my marriage? I've been with my wife my entire life, and it's hard to imagine a life without her. I know the straightforward answer might be to leave her, but we have 5 kids together. If there's any chance to salvage our marriage, I want to seriously consider it. Based on the advice from this thread, I've decided to take the following steps. Get second tests, just to make sure there hasn't been some unusual mix-up or error. Confront my wife with all 4 of my older children present. Talk to my youngest about the situation and offer her the choice of having a paternity test, letting it be entirely her decision. Seek therapy without a doubt. My mental state has really been declining over the past few weeks, and I owe it to my kids to keep it together. Depending on whether my wife tells the truth and what her explanation is, if any, I haven't ruled out some form of counseling. However, at this moment, I think divorce is almost certain, unless she drastically changes her attitude. Get in touch with a lawyer and prepare for divorce if it comes to that. Once again, I want to express my gratitude to all of you for taking the time to offer your support and advice. To address some questions that have come up. How did the ancestry results suggest I wasn't her father? My family is entirely of Irish descent, and we have no relatives outside of Ireland except for my immediate family. I even have the stereotypical red hair. However, my daughter's ancestry results showed no connection to the British Isles, Western Europe, or Northern Europe. That's what raised concerns, although it's not conclusive, hence the paternity tests. Which 2 children share the same father? My 2 eldest daughters share the same father. How did your wife conceive your children? Our eldest daughter was not planned, while all the others were. We conceived each time several months after actively trying. Our first 3 planned children were a mutual decision, but our youngest was a result of my wife's desire for one more child in her late 30s. Eventually, I agreed to it, and she was conceived several months after we started trying. Are you infertile? I don't know. I've never had a fertility test done. However, the fact that none of our planned children are biologically mine makes me think that I might be infertile. I will get a fertility test as soon as possible. Update. After posting my kids and I confronted their mom not long after, it was a tough conversation. She seemed to realize that nobody believed her anymore, and she broke down apologizing a lot, but she wouldn't explain herself or give me any closure. We barely spoke for the next few weeks, and I thought she might eventually open up and talk to me. I figured she got caught up in a lie that spiraled out of control and needed time to sort it out, but that didn't happen. One evening, I came home to a heartbreaking discovery. She had an excessive dose and taken her own life. I lost the love of my life, and I'll never know the truth about her actions. I wish I could turn back time and forget about it all. Regardless of her mistakes, I genuinely wanted to work things out, and now I'm burdened with guilt for pushing her for answers. The most painful part of this whole ordeal was seeing my kids trying so hard to support me, despite losing their mother. So please, take the time to express your love to your family while you still can. Story 2. 10 years ago, my ex-wife started seeing another guy and kicked me out of my own house. Our relationship wasn't great, but I was completely taken by surprise. To make things worse, I was served with a protection order that forbade me from returning home or seeing my kids without written permission from my wife. This order lasted for 90 days, and it crushed me. A family member introduced me to a tough lawyer who was incredibly smart and straightforward. She filed a response to the protection order, but warned me that these legal processes take time, and we probably wouldn't get in front of a judge within the 90-day period. She stressed that I had to follow the court order to the letter. If there was any evidence that I hadn't, it would be an uphill battle when my wife sought to renew it. Within just one day, my ex needed me to look after the kids. I was staying at a friend's place since I had nowhere else to go, so we agreed that I would watch the kids at our house. I waited nearby while awaiting an email from her. She called me, and I reminded her of the court order and that I wouldn't come without written permission. This happened 2 more times in the first week, so I told her I wouldn't leave my current location until I received that email, which was about 20 minutes away. I even sent her a text to remind her. The very next day, she once again failed to send written permission. We had planned for me to pick up the kids and take them to school because their school was close to my workplace. However, because I hadn't received the required permission, I ran out of time to get the kids to school and make it to work on time. She called me in a rage when I wasn't there. I reminded her about the court order and that I was out of time. She ended up being significantly late for work that day. She wanted to give me blanket permission to come and go as needed, but my lawyer advised against it, emphasizing that I should stick to the court order. The climax of this situation occurred a few weeks later when she once again forgot to send me permission. Her boyfriend was staying over, but he didn't have his car. It turns out he was her direct supervisor at work. She had to call a coworker to pick up the kids and take them to school, and the coworker eventually found out about the situation. This gossip quickly spread at their workplace. Within a week, her boyfriend got fired because of their relationship, and my ex was suspended from her job. By that time, I had my own place, so most days the kids ended up staying with me. Later, I found out that the boyfriend was the one who suggested the protection order. My ex-wife was pretty mad about it because it turned out to be evidence that I wasn't a threat to her or the family. The judge scolded her for it when we settled for support and parenting time. She called it intentional and harmful parental alienation. This is the second part of a decade-long story that's now working out quite well. I've always been respectful and polite to the boyfriend because he became my kid's stepfather, but I swore that if I ever had the chance, I'd get back at him. I thought it might be something small, but he practically handed me the opportunity, and I've been running with it for almost 3 weeks now. My kids are mostly grown now, some in college and others in 11th or 12th grade. The college kids live with me, while the high schoolers still go back and forth between their mom's place and mine. I'm also remarried. My wife and I each have our own cars, but she owns and insures a minivan for when we all need to go somewhere together. The kids can use it too since only one of them has a car. We only have one set of keys, so I attached an AirTag to it. It's a little device that tracks its location, just in case the keys were ever lost. About 3 weeks ago, one of my older kids took the van out for the night but ended up staying at his mom's place on the couch. Around 7 a.m. the next day, another kid asked to use the van. I checked the AirTag and found out it was hours away in an industrial area of another town. I was pretty concerned about why my kid was there. I called him, and he was at his mom's place, right where he said he'd be. He had no idea the van was missing. I called the police and told them where the van was located. Within 20 minutes, they had pulled over the van, and the driver claimed he had permission to use it. To my surprise, it was my ex-wife's boyfriend. The police didn't seem very interested in holding him, as it would be easier for him to drive the van back to our town, and we could sort it out there. However, he didn't own the van, nor was he listed on the insurance to drive it, so I insisted that it be impounded. In Canada, we can't press charges, but I was determined to pursue this as theft and not let it slide. Since the guy was out of town with no ride, the police did end up detaining him, probably because it was more convenient. I got the information for the yard where they impounded the van. Since we both had the next day off, my wife and I drove over there to pick it up. When we arrived, I first checked for any external damage since it seemed to be sitting lower than usual. Fortunately, there was no visible damage on the outside. However, when I checked inside, I discovered that it was loaded with industrial fasteners and cables, like the kind used for seismic mitigation. It turns out that the boyfriend had used my wife's van to pick up materials for his job. My wife immediately turned and walked towards the office, and I had to jog to catch up with her. She asked the people at the yard who had access to the van. They explained that only my wife and I had access because they had the only set of keys. I understood where she was going with this. I told them that no one should be allowed to access the van except for us. I gave $35 as a tip, and they assured me that they would keep it secure by moving it to a locked area within the yard. We then headed back home without the van. We hadn't even returned home from the long drive when I received the first text from the boyfriend regarding retrieving the equipment from the van. I explained that we had left the van at the impound lot due to the expenses we incurred, including towing, impound fees, and daily storage. I made it clear that he needed to pay these costs up front before I would consider releasing the van. He got really angry and swore that he would reimburse me, but I firmly declined his offer. Within an hour, I received a call from his boss, who urgently needed the equipment for a time-sensitive job. I informed the boss that the van had been impounded and that I wouldn't be able to retrieve it until the following week. I reiterated that payment had to be made in advance. The boss began using harsh language, but I calmly explained that I had not stolen a vehicle to transport their equipment. When he continued to be disrespectful, I told him I wouldn't tolerate the abuse and hung up. Then I blocked him and his company on all the platforms where I could be reached. That was 3 weeks ago. Since then, I've managed to come up with excuses every time the boyfriend tried to arrange picking up the van. Often, it was because the kids needed the van and I had to drive them. The boss managed to reach me a few times using different phone numbers and sent numerous emails that I ignored. However, I did respond once to explain that both my wife and I needed about 4 hours for the round trip, and the payment had to be made in advance. The costs had added up, including $25 per day for secure storage, towing, and impound fees, and so on. I also wanted to be reimbursed for the fuel that the boyfriend had used, as well as our travel expenses. We had previously agreed on the standard rate of 58 cents per kilometer, and the boss sent an e-transfer to cover the total cost of our trips. By now, the van had made one trip and our car had made two, totaling almost $600. So finally, on Friday, it all came together. My wife and I drove over to pick up the van. We had already prepaid for it, and it was ready to be released. When I grabbed the keys, I dropped off a dozen beers at the office as a gesture of goodwill. Then, I went to get the van. However, I had no intention of transporting the boss and boyfriend's equipment. Instead, I arranged for it to be stored at the yard, with the same storage rate as a vehicle. I had it unloaded and left just before the yard closed for the weekend. Shortly after, I received a call from the boyfriend, asking when he could come with a work truck to collect the equipment. I explained that it was still at the impound lot, almost 2 hours away, and that the office would only be open on Monday at 9 a.m. There was only silence on the other end of the line, so I hung up after about 10 seconds. Throughout this whole ordeal, I've been getting occasional updates from my ex, with whom I now have a good relationship. She was furious with her boyfriend and made it clear to me that any consequences were entirely his fault. He managed to keep his job, but he won't be receiving the next pay increase, and he won't get his year-end bonus. My ex mentioned that their workplace was severely short-staffed, which is why they couldn't afford to let him go. However, he's in trouble both at home and at work. There's been no word on whether he'll face criminal charges for taking the van, but that's up to the legal authorities to handle, and I'm not pursuing a civil lawsuit. Story 3. 7 years ago, I was married to my ex, and by that point, we had been together for 6 years. I thought our relationship was fantastic. I had recently received a nice inheritance, so I used the money to buy a condo for us to live in, got her a new car as a token of appreciation for her unwavering support over the years, and invested the rest in starting my own company. I believed we were deeply in love, and we had countless discussions about starting a family because we both wanted kids. One day, I returned home from work and she gestured for me to join her on the couch. She then dropped a bombshell. She was pregnant. Initially, I was overjoyed for a brief moment, but reality soon hit me like a ton of bricks. The impossibility of her being pregnant dawned on me because we were both cisgender women. I started crying, realizing what this meant. She too began to cry and apologized, but suggested that maybe this could be a positive turn of events for us. Incredulously, I asked how this could possibly be a good thing. She explained that it might be the perfect opportunity for us to have the family we had always dreamed of. I lacked the energy to argue at that moment, so I packed a few things and told her I needed some time to stay with my cousin for a few days before coming back to discuss it. I was a complete wreck during that week at my cousin's place. When I returned, I told her I wanted a divorce. I packed up the rest of my belongings while she pleaded that she couldn't do it without me and accused me of abandoning our child. I remained silent and couldn't find the strength to do anything but pack and leave. During the divorce proceedings, I allowed her to keep the condo, even though it had been purchased with my inheritance. I also transferred her car, which was in my name, to her. She demanded alimony, and despite not being entitled to it, I agreed to pay it for a year. She also asked for child support, but that request was denied for obvious reasons. A year later, the divorce was finalized. About a month before the divorce was officially over, I met another woman. I was uncertain about dating again, but my friends encouraged me to give it a try. Things progressed slowly between us, and I eventually shared my past with her. She expressed sympathy for my situation. We went on dates, shared kisses, and then suddenly she stopped responding to my texts and calls for a week. I was baffled and worried about what had happened. She later showed up at my door looking sad and dropped a bombshell. She was pregnant. At first I thought, not again. But she quickly clarified that she had only found out a few days earlier. She had a doctor's appointment that confirmed she was approximately 16 weeks pregnant. She assured me that she had not cheated since we had only known each other for 3 months. She acknowledged that this situation might be challenging for me, expressed her genuine fondness for me, and understood if I wanted nothing to do with her. Then she left. In the end, I couldn't bring myself to let her go, and we decided to stay together. It was a bit confusing initially, but we managed to work through it. Now my company has been thriving for years. We've purchased a house, tied the knot, welcomed 2 more kids, got a dog and a cat, and our families adore each other. However, last Saturday, my ex reappeared. We were at a family gathering on my wife's side when she unexpectedly showed up at my wife's aunt's house. She wanted to expose me as a terrible person who abandoned her and our child to start a new family with someone else. She accused me of leaving them with nothing and not paying overdue child support, and so on. Apparently, she became friends with my wife's cousin's wife during a PTA meeting. She shared my story, and they decided to confront me during the family gathering, intending to reveal evidence of my supposed wrongdoings to everyone. My wife tried to defend me, but her aunt, the cousin's mom, abruptly silenced us and harshly kicked us out, threatening to publicly shame me and ruin my company. We left the gathering in shock, and my wife was determined to wage war if anyone dared to slander me. On Sunday morning, my wife's dad, the aunt's brother, called to discuss the texts and voicemails they had been receiving. They hadn't attended the gathering. We met for lunch and explained everything that had happened. They were aware of my previous divorce, but not the details. They understood the situation, but my mother-in-law suggested that, since I have money, I should assist my ex, pay the child support, help her find a place if necessary, and be a parental figure in my ex's daughter's life, reasoning that the child was conceived during your marriage. She has some unusual spiritual beliefs. My wife is now upset with her mom for saying that, while her siblings mostly support our side, except for one who is close to the cousin and believes his wife's version of events, we've decided to ignore the extended family drama for now. Update. I noticed that many people fixated on the fact that I gave the condo to my ex. I get it, but at that moment I was feeling really low and I still had some love for her, I guess. I wanted to get rid of everything, so I thought, well, she'll need a place for her and her child and it'll be quicker to just give it to her. So I did it, even against my lawyer's advice. My wife didn't cheat on me. She had been with someone weeks before we even met. We met, went on our first date a month later, and 2 months into our relationship, she found out she was pregnant. We took things slow, didn't move in together right away. We stayed together to see how things would go. It could have ended at any time, but it didn't. We moved in together when kid was almost a year old. My mother-in-law has some strange spiritual beliefs with her friends that have been going on for ages. It never really bothered me, but I do find some of her views questionable. I mentioned to her that I gave my ex the condo, and she said, "But you don't know if she still has it." Someone mentioned that it might be because she cheated on Phil, and my wife and/or her siblings might be a product of that. Honestly, I don't feel comfortable bringing that up with my wife or anyone else right now, so I won't. Okay, so a few things went down. I got all the divorce paperwork, made copies, and handed them to my wife's family so everyone could see it all. I got mixed reactions. Some people told me they thought my ex was clearly crazy from the beginning but didn't say much because they thought it was obvious. They thought those who believed her were just as crazy, so talking to them would be pointless. But they did apologize for not saying anything earlier. We're not that close anyway. They're extended relatives. Others initially believed my ex because she had evidence, but after showing them my documents, they apologized profusely, said they'd support me in suing her, and offered to be witnesses, and so on. Then there are those who still believe my ex, like my cousin, cousin's wife, aunt, and a few others close to them. They accuse me of falsifying documents. My brother-in-law, who's close to my cousin, hasn't said anything about the situation. He doesn't seem to be on their side, but hasn't admitted he was wrong either. He's just staying silent. I filed for a restraining order. The temporary one got denied, but there's a hearing scheduled. Last week, I had a meeting with one of my biggest clients. We've known each other professionally for a long time. We're not friends, but he knew I went through a divorce years ago. When he arrived at the reception, I greeted him and started walking him to the meeting. But he stopped me and said that someone had gone to his office and told him that I abandoned a child. He asked if it was true. I told him it was false, gave him a quick summary, and even offered to show him my divorce papers. He said that wasn't necessary, that he trusts my word, and offered to help if I needed in the future. We went on with our meeting. I was really upset that she had gone after my business, but then something worse happened. My lawyer has been working on a cease and desist letter, and I was debating whether to sue her or wait for the letter. Then on Saturday, something happened. I took my kids to the mall to buy some summer stuff. School classes are over, but their school still has some activities, and there's a big event next weekend. We needed to buy some things for that and other stuff. We left my wife at home to relax since it's getting harder for her. When we got back, I handed the kids some bags and told them to go inside because Mama had a snack for them. I said I'd handle the rest. I made a few trips in and out of the house. When I was almost done unloading the trunk, I heard someone say, "Mommy!" I turned around and saw a little girl standing there. I was confused, and the girl looked scared. Then I saw my ex approaching, and she said to the girl, "Yes, that's who she was supposed to be." The girl stayed silent for the rest of the exchange, but my ex started yelling at me. I'm paraphrasing here, but this is how the conversation basically went. My ex expressed disbelief that I wouldn't want to be in her daughter's life, emphasizing that she was an amazing and innocent child who had done nothing wrong. She accused me of abandoning her for a random person who got pregnant and made me responsible for the child. I said that she tried to do that. My ex denied being a random person, claiming it was different. I pointed out the actual difference, stating that the woman in question hadn't cheated on me and I had chosen to be responsible for the child without any coercion. My ex argued that it wasn't fair and questioned how I could bring other kids into our home while not prioritizing our daughter. I dismissed her arguments and asked her to leave. She continued to accuse me of not thinking about our daughter, pointing out disparities in our kids' education. I responded by calling her unreasonable and telling her to leave, threatening to call the police. She challenged the likelihood of me doing so and urged me to be reasonable. At that moment, my wife emerged from the house, announcing that she had already called the police, advising my ex to leave before they arrived, and asking me to come inside. I grabbed the last 2 bags and went inside. Through the window, I saw my ex grabbing the little girl by her arm quite roughly and dragging her to her car. Then she left, and now I'm genuinely worried about the girl. The police showed up, we talked to them, and showed them footage from our cameras, including footage from my car. I filed for a temporary restraining order again and it got approved, so that's good for now. I told my lawyer to forget about the cease and desist letter. I'm suing her. I can confirm that she doesn't live in the condo anymore. I'm not sure what happened to it or where she's living now, but we'll see. Update. Hello again, it's been a few weeks. My ex hasn't showed up at my door again since last time, thank the universe. However, she did show up at my office looking for me last Monday, but I wasn't there. I'm mostly working from home now to help my wife, who's on bed rest due to pregnancy complications. I did go to the office on Thursday, and as I was leaving to go home, my ex's sister was waiting for me. We used to be close, but we cut contact when the cheating happened, per my therapist's advice. Anyway, she said she had been coming for a few days, waiting outside, hoping to see me because she needed to talk to me about something important. So we went to a nearby cafe, and she told me what my ex has been up to since the divorce. She sold the condo about 1.5 years after the divorce was finalized and moved to a rented house. She told me my ex said it was a quick way to make money to buy all the stuff a kid would need growing up. As time went on, her family noticed stranger-than-normal behaviors in her. I won't go into too much detail, or we'll be here for a while, but essentially she was diagnosed with bipolar disorder about 2 years ago and was treated for a bit, but then she stopped. I talked to my lawyer and he said this makes things a bit tricky, as she could defend herself with not guilty by reason of insanity. However, the fact that she has been refusing treatment for a while now would help my case. The sister said she's sorry for how my ex is acting and that she would help me with whatever I need for the case. She's still around her sister to try and mitigate her episodes for the sake of her niece. I asked why Child Protective Services hasn't gotten involved, and she said her parents are trying to prevent that from happening. I couldn't stay longer. I had to get home before my SIL had to leave, so we exchanged numbers and will be in contact if needed. That's all for now. I have the hearing for the permanent restraining order this week, so hopefully that goes well. The sister mentioned that my ex let it slip that she's not sure who the biological father is because she slept with 4 different people, 3 guys, around the time the kid was conceived. When I learned this, I felt even more stupid that she was just sleeping around and I had no clue. Update. The youngest of our bunch felt left out, always being stuck in that same little room all the time, and she decided to come out earlier than expected. Combined with the NICU stay and school starting, I feel like I could use a long nap. But thankfully, everyone is doing great now. Now, on to my ex. The anxiety levels I was dealing with were through the roof back then. They're still pretty high, but at least I can breathe. Basically, there was silence for about 2 weeks, and then I got a call saying she tried to cash a fake check in my name. I have no clue how she found my bank, but just like the fertility clinic documents, the check was obviously fake and didn't fool the clerk. She got arrested right away. Currently, she's in a psychiatric facility getting treatment. I'm not sure how long she'll be there, but once she's out, she's headed to trial for check fraud. And from what I've heard, it doesn't look good for her. On the flip side, her parents know I was planning to sue her and that I have evidence of another forgery crime she committed. They begged me not to go through with it since that would likely mean a longer sentence for their daughter. Maybe it's an unpopular choice, but I made a deal with them. They'll make sure everyone she lied to about me knows the truth. I don't want to deal with this right now, so I accepted. So far, it's working out. As for the girl, I'm happy to say she's with my ex Sil right now. I won't go into all the details, but it seems there's no way for my ex to get her back in the future. Even though it's not really my business, I let my ex Sil know that if her parents try to get the girl, I'll help her with that. My wife and I are also distancing ourselves from my mother-in-law. It turns out that my ex befriending the cousin was just a coincidence, and they both decided to use it to their advantage. The cousin and the aunt used my ex's lies to get back at me, claiming they work harder than me to make less money than me, and it's not fair.